Welcome to the EMN podcast, where philosophy meets disaster and uncomfortable truths meet the profession we call emergency management. This is not safe space thinking. This is the arena. Let's begin.
Good morning. Todd, can you?
I'm back. I am having technical difficulties this morning. I don't know what is going on. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well, yes. And good morning again.
All right, well, I'm back. Wow. So look at this craziness that's happening. It's as Brian and I one time were talking to this girl. She's like a wooey, Zen person, right? She starts talking about like Mercury being in retrograde and stuff like this, and that was like really screws with your computers. So from now on, when every time that we have a technical problem, we say Mercury is in retrograde. So that's supposed to be what's happening right now. So
Mercury is in retrograde. Gotcha. Understood.
So we're not here to talk about craziness like that, though, right? I mean, we could. It would be a great conversation, I think. But before we get into what Mercury's doing, we need to talk about what's happening with FEMA and this great document that has come out. I don't know if sarcasm is dripping off me or not, but it should be. So wow. It was an amazing meeting, I guess. And I don't think anything was a shocker. It seemed like they followed what came out, sort of that leak that occurred. Not very many changes from that. I don't think anybody who watched it came out going, with a lot of more insight to what's happening, at least in my opinion, and where we're at. So I kind of want to feel what you have to say about it, and then we'll jump into that conversation. So what did you watch the event?
I did not. I was actually at the California Emergency Services Association conference, MCON, in San Diego last week. So that came out. I'm trying to remember when it came out, but it came out like it seemed to me in the middle of the conference, and they distributed a link so everyone can read it. I did read the actual the slides, and I did get a good chance to read a good portion of the report. As you mentioned, I mean, the report differed, I think they changed up the order and of, the recommendations of the key points. And I think they changed around perhaps a few items there, but I think a lot of the core of the draft that had come out, I believe in sometime in, I want to say, 2 months ago, 3 months ago or so. It seemed like December or so, which I don't think it was supposed to come out, but that draft had come out. So yeah, there you go.
We tend, I know our tribe, if you will, the emergency management world, we tend to be doom and gloom a lot of things. I don't think we should be worried. Well, not necessarily worried. That's the word that I'm looking for. There are some concerns. There are some areas that we really need to take a look at and figure out some things on it. But on the other side, I don't think it was all black, right? I think there was some, darkness of the event. I think that there was some light in in those pages. Are there going to be some changes that we're going to have to do? Absolutely. I'm really interested to see what occurs with EMI. I always say it wrong now. The academy or the university. I mean, whatever, the National Disaster University, NDEM, and whatever. What's it called?
NDEMU. National Disaster Emergency Management University.
I am like really bad with that. I'm stuck. Right. We're talking earlier today. We're talking about name changes when it comes to stadiums. That's how I feel about EMI. It's like a stadium change. Like I'm still referring back to the old name. But it doesn't seem like there's room in this document about that training. It seems like they want to push it back down to the states, and this is how I'm reading it. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. But that's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah, I think, if I can sort of sum up this, it's, FEMA, as we understood it or had seen it become, let's say, over the last, let's say, 2 decades, okay, sort of building from, it went through its, I'd say, transition and transformation under James Lee Witt, or as some people like to say, old Blue Eyes, so to speak. Um, uh, and
Frank
then
Sinatra.
what's not Sinatra? This is, James Lee Witt. Yeah, this was Blue Eyes. Anyway, so it's, and then we saw transition and transformation after Katrina, post Michael Brown, and a lot of the development that was there under the various FEMA administrators and so forth, from Fugate to Brock to Gaynor, etc. They've all had their impacts, etc., and Criswell, so to speak. And I think that the idea that okay, we're going to call FEMA when there's an emergency. The emergency threshold is set here. That's changed. That idea of calling 911, calling FEMA as almost a 911 has changed. It's now, well, no, call 311 when you have situations. And then when it's an extreme situation, and it has crossed over into a much more critical threshold, then you can call us and we become a 911, so to speak. So I think that to me is a paradigm change. And we've always known that all disasters, all responses are local, right? But the robustness of that has now, at least the perception of it. Now, these are all recommendations and will take time to implement. And we'll see what happens in the near future as far as our any changes that may happen both nationally and locally. And I think that still there are states that have the capabilities to do that. California is, I think, a good example of that, and how that will need to change as far as public assistance and individual assistance and mitigation measures and things like that. A lot of that's already underway, has been underway for years in California. I think the question, of course, is the support going to still be there from the federal government as far as hazard mitigation, grant programs, and so forth. So,
a couple of things, and we're going to get into some disaster politics, if you will. One thing is, this still has to go through Congress. It has to be voted on, approved. Right. Unless they push it through right now, and make it occur in the next few months. I mean, we got mid-years coming up. The likelihood of the Trump administration surviving the mid-years is very low. And this is just me reading the tea leaves. Mm-hmm. And then does that mean that the Democrats, if they take it, and assuming that they do, but the way everything seems to be pointing right now, the Congress back, not necessarily on the Senate side, but for sure on Congress, looks like the numbers are playing out. Does this mean that this dies in the water? Do they have the appetite to make the change? I haven't spoken to any of the congressional people about this, but I'm saying, is there an appetite do the Democrats have the appetite to make the changes? I guess that's the question. Because they're going to be ruling now. That being said, then it has to go back to the Senate. So there's still a lot of room here on this recommendations for. That's what I'm saying. Don't push that panic button yet. And then the other side of it too is a lot of it's what we've already, as you said, Andrew. A lot of it's what we do right now. The state of California isn't necessarily looking for the federal government to come in to run the emergencies, but for sure, still looking at funding from the federal government, and they're looking to holistically change that process as well. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting conversation on what does that look like, and they're looking more at like a CDBG type of funding for disasters, Now, what happens when you run out of that disaster fund at your state? That's a whole. Do we go back to Congress and ask for more money? I mean, what does that look like, and what does it mean when you have a presidentially declared disaster now, where it used to come in with some funding? Does that go away? I have a lot of questions there on the policy side of things, and like I said, those are some of those gaps that I'm like, okay, a little confused about. There's not a lot of answers in the document, a lot of rhetoric out there, but does that parlay into a better ran federal agency? And don't worry about my English, because that's my first language and my only language, and I don't speak it very well.
We're all working towards progress. Here's the thing, and I think when you look at it's a paradoxical situation in some ways, right? We're asking for this document says basically that point, right, is that locals need to be more responsible. The states need to take more control and funding around this. Not every state. We're 50 states and territories and tribal governments, etc. It's as you know, it's a rowdy bunch, and they're all a little bit different. If we take California as an example, I think California is a good example, is probably being one of the more developed emergency management systems in the country. All right, and I'll just start with that statement. You may disagree with me there. You're welcome to, even though you are in Los Angeles area or in the LA greater area, right? Orange County, LA County.
I work in LA County, so
right there you go. So,
I can see Los Angeles City from my window.
Okay, you can't see Russia though.
I can't see Russia.
So I don't want to get you into trouble because you live there and work there. But I'm not going to get you into trouble because I have a lot of respect for the system because it's been around. It's been developed for a long period of time. California has its standardized emergency management system, SEMS. It's being revitalized as far as I know right now. Don't know how much of an impact that has on a day-to-day aspect of what happens there. But you have your coordination and mutual aid system that works or should work to a degree from local to operational area to region to state, so to speak. Right. And the feds come in only when that exceeds that capacity as far as funding or resources. But you have a lot of mutual aid that exists even from state to state between California and Nevada or Utah or Arizona, that sort of dynamic that exists there. There are states, though, that are not as well equipped to do that. You look at a state like Arkansas. I don't know how well Arkansas can muster a response absent federal support. How much of that is strengthened by a state system to county or local that exists there?
So,
and I don't mean to pick on Arkansas. Love the folks in Arkansas, please. It's where James Lee Witt originated from. So
yeah, absolutely, Little Rock. So I'm gonna interrupt here for 1 second because I want to pull on that string. So when we're looking at a state like Arkansas, Mississippi, those that we recognize aren't as progressive when it comes to emergency management and even how the systems work, and that do rely upon a lot of federal response support after hurricanes and tornadoes and whatnot. And none of what we're saying is speaking out of pocket. This is just the way the system is, right? However, if we're looking at mutual aid and kind of the way we run mutual aid here in California, it depends who you speak to. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but this is the general idea here, is now we're looking at our neighbors first, then the county, then the state, then the federal government, right? And it happens pretty seamlessly, especially in our larger fires, right? The bell goes out. We have automatic mutual aid from fire departments from across the county. Then the county is going to ask the state for support, and we get some neighboring counties to come help out. So I mean, it's set up, right? I mean, should we be looking at that from state to state mutual aid compacts without having to go through the federal government? And that's an interesting conversation where we could call Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon, I suppose, right? Call those states in quickly without having to ask for a federal deck.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question comes into that is then how do we pay for it?
Right.
That's where the question comes. So if we're having that CDBG style cash infusion to our state to pay for those programs, to pay for the mutual aid, as any rainy day fund, if you will, as we know, and so I said we're getting to a little on the politics side of things a little bit right now.
Right.
Most rainy day funds don't stay in that proverbial lockbox, right? We're going to put it in a lockbox. Yeah. And I mean, they tend to find it and they go, well, there's money sitting here. We're going to use it for other programs. Or borrow from the lockbox,
Yeah.
all these different terms, right? And, you and I are old enough to remember these things. So maybe some of the younger people listening are going, what the hell are they talking about? But we've seen those rainy day funds be rated for other programs. That's my
Right.
only fear is like, will that CDBG money sit there untouched until we need to have it?
And certain states and certain states have restrictions on what local governments are able to save or put aside for rainy day funds. States have a little bit more latitude as far as that's concerned, but states also have their limitations as far as what they're able to save or put aside for those types of responses that may come down the road. And you live in California, you have high tax situation in California, and
Ice the nation. Yay!
I don't know. New Jersey's a good rival there. You and I can probably devote a whole episode to real estate and income taxes, etc. So that'll be another topic, I think, for another day. My point, though, is that I think state governments are reticent to want to increase taxes, so they're trying to figure out. I mean, that's my understand. I mean, it's my general understanding. I mean, but that's going to have to change if the federal government's not going to be able to kick in when it comes to left of boom and right of boom. Left of boom in terms of hazard mitigation and preparation, and right of boom in terms of recovery, costs and bringing things back to a state of normal.
The question is whether the federal government, as you said, isn't able to kick in. It's whether they have the appetite to kick in. So there is still a mechanism to get federal dollars.
Yeah.
Right. It becomes more difficult. And they're saying, oh, it's streamlining the ability for us to get money. Right. This is what they're selling it as, the streamlining the ability for the locals to get additional funding into the areas that are impacted without having to go through like the crazy federal process that goes now with,
Yep.
I mean, realistically, when you say, okay, I'm going to go through federal reimbursement, it is not like a week or two. It's years in some cases.
Right.
So,
Yep.
and they're trying to streamline that. I appreciate that part of it. I appreciate the idea they're saying, hey, we're trying to get the money back in your pocket quicker.
Yeah.
Without having all these inspections and have all these different things, and we're going to believe you. We're going to trust that you're giving the right stuff. But there could be audits, so make sure you're telling the truth. But the idea here is it going to work? And
that's a good question, and I think so. Just to give a name to some of this, right? And folks can read the report. I put a link in our comments there. So I think that folks can see that, correct?
Yes.
Comments there. And that is sort of the RAPID program that's supposed to replace public assistance. And there's a 30-day release that is anywhere from a 50 to 75% federal share. I think it to me, it sort of squares more on the 50% or more centers around 50%, where it was higher before in general. And their intention is to, close out the existing hazard mitigation program in short order, so to speak. And then there's the individual assistance, what they're now calling the FAIR program. And since don't have the acronym or the name of the acronym right in front of me, but basically it's a replacement for that. That these are supposed to the first one the public assistance, now called rapid, supposed to be more of a parametric measure of kicking in. So when it exceeds a certain parametric level, much like catastrophic bonds are concerned for risk management or for insurance, and then the fair is supposed to be a certain percentage with a cap. So I believe it's 15% up to a total of $1 million in value. I think the issue there is, and then there's also, I should mention, cost coverage. I think for 3 to 6 months for people who are renters. Now, putting that aside, I mean, I don't, I know following the LA fires, the Eaton fire, and the fires in Altadena, et cetera, and Palisades Park, it was hard for folks to find rental apartments available. And so those costs increase, not to mention the fact that if we're capping things at 15% or $150,000 total, right? Home values are extraordinarily expensive.
Okay, hang on a second though, Andrew.
What?
That 150 isn't buying you out of your property. That
No,
150, that 150 is a rebuild. But even with a rebuild, right? I like that's your face. I love it because I have the same face. I'm like, even with a rebuild, 150 is like what, half of what it costs to rebuild a building today. So it still doesn't get you whole, but
that's not going to get you that far. I mean, if you think about those homeowners, a lot of folks have the perception, oh, those folks who are living in Altadena or the Pacific Palisades in some cases. Pacific Palisades probably more so. Those are fancy area. A lot of those folks can afford to pay. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of folks who have lived there for decades. Many older residents. They're not, that socially vulnerable, but that they don't have the kind of funds to be able to rebuild at the level that they need to. And insurance is important. So insurance is supposed to be primary, absolutely. Yes. But in some cases, that insurance isn't going to necessarily make you whole at the level, because the insurance company's going to cap it at a certain level. And then we all know also there are other expenses that are associated with rebuilding, right? There's the remediation that needs to happen. And I know the federal government came in to handle a lot of that. And it did that, as far as I understand it, it was handled as, relatively efficiently. I mean, better than it has been in the past. Absolutely. There's a lot of toxic chemicals and other substances that, remained after that, not the least of which is lithium-ion batteries. There's the car, we call it the car park, so to speak, in California has a larger percentage of electric vehicles.
Well, a couple of things on that. Give credit where credit's due. They did a great job on that, as swiftly as possible. And you're right. I mean, like today, homes, when they're burning, toxins are crazy, right? I mean, all the plastics in your house, all the everything. I mean, just you can get into the environmental side of it here too, if we want to. Yeah, I was about to say, George, I was about to bring it up. George says in California, where insurance is leaving fewer options. So I'll give you a personal story. So my neighborhood, right? I live in the Wooey. I had AAA insurance for the longest time. They said, "Hey, sorry, we're not going to insure you anymore." I had to go find insurance elsewhere. We're using Farmers. My wife always corrects me. So I think we're Farmers. It's not State Farm. We're using Farmers. And my entire neighborhood, 3 cul-de-sacs into the Wooey, and the street down. So I'm talking probably, I don't know, 50, 60 homes in our area are all insured by Farmers Insurance. All right. That does not give me the warm fuzzy thinking if our neighborhood burns, I keep saying State Farm. Is Farmers Insurance going to be solvent? State Farm already is just done. If you guys would look at the news, are finding issues right now with the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire. So they're having issues, and they're like one of the bigger insurance companies, right? So we're seeing this, and as Jorge brings up the fact that my phone is ringing. Interesting. So State Farm, sorry about that. State Farm as having issues. So as Jorge brings up, California insurance leaving fewer options. So that's where we're at with that.
Yeah, and there's a California state program that's supposed to step in, but even that program, I think, is under some strain as well. And the deductible on that, I think, has increased as far as I remember. I'm not an insurance expert, but I did, do some reading on that recently as far as the California insurance program. But to Jorge's, and a shout out to Jorge Rodriguez, who I saw out in CISA in San Diego this past week. Insurance is a challenge. Insurance is a challenge, I think, acutely in California, but it's a challenge throughout the country as far as insurance companies are pulling out of certain markets and not being able to be a backstop there. And the report bears out that that's supposed to be primary, but if people don't have that as a go-to in their communities, then they can only rely on the state, as and especially as you put it in the WUI areas, or in those areas that are more prone to or vulnerable to flooding. And then it becomes, okay, how do we manage that risk through mitigation programs? And there are programs that are out there to increase defensible space, reduce vegetation in certain areas, manage that appropriately. And so where's the money come from? Where does it go to? Is it we want to spend that money on left of boom, the mitigation aspect, because we know that multiple has a great return on it. The paradox is it's hard for us to be able to prove that nothing happens, right? We talked about the aspect of silent failure, right? So silent failure, it's not the fancy, exciting program that people think of, hazard mitigation programs, whether it's levees, whether it's I'm not going to get it correct, but reinforcing certain buildings, etc., for seismic retrofitting that happens. Seismic retrofitting in California. And then defensible space and mitigation for wildfire risk and things like that. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, and it's not necessarily what emergency managers who come into the profession really are attuned to, or knowledgeable of, at least at the start. I'm not saying that people don't become that more, and it needs to be a significant part of what we do. But the public perception is not one that sort of looks at that as the entire scope.
I saw this thing yesterday, and I haven't vetted it, so I don't want to give it credit right now because it might just be bunk. But there was some article. I won't even say article. There was this post that was talking about a study, being very vague because I didn't vet it and I don't want to credit it. That the issues in New Orleans are grave right now, and the recommendation of depopulating portions of New Orleans. Now, we've seen this with after Katrina, some of the issues, specifically with levees. And if we're not putting money into those to mitigation programs like the levees for New Orleans, maybe that's the truth. Maybe there's something where they have to depopulate areas. Again, I don't know. I'm not crediting that thing. I'm just saying there's an interesting conversation to be had. And maybe we had the same conversation here in Southern California with the issues with where we're building. I mean, my house has been there since 1965, so it's not like a new building or anything like that. It's not like it's a brand new. But and there's a lot of buffer over there, and the area hasn't, knock on wood, had too many fires. But I mean, there's a threat, right? And the insurance companies are seeing that threat, and they're deciding not to cover that threat, right? And moving out. And as Jorge talks about, the California insurance companies are leaving. Now, Andrew, that I'm very libertarian in my politics, and I'm about to say something that's probably going to blow your mind. I almost think that we need to have a national insurance that's not just flood insurance, but it's a disaster insurance. that's backed by the federal government, where everybody has to buy into it, right? I know lightning bolts are going to come from the sky and hit me in the head here. But if we're requiring everybody to have fire insurance for their homes and flood insurance for their homes, and no one wants to buy into it because it's expensive, if we everybody buys into this, it could be through taxes, it could be through a fee, whatever, however you want to put it together, but buys into this insurance, just like you do FICO, just like you do your other payroll pulled insurance, deduct insurance. Because when that hurricane occurs, when that tornado occurs, when that large wildfire burns through, when those things do occur, the earthquake in California, it's not just homeowners that are impacted by it, right? And renters and all this kind of stuff. If everybody has a disaster insurance, if we buy into it, everybody in Maine to Washington State, are buying into it. The cost for everybody goes all the way down, and it becomes something that's usable. Now, goes back into the whole thing. Will that money go into a lockbox and be pilfered by the politicians? That's another story. But I propose that, and I'm sure people are throwing darts at me right now, and I'm trying to dodge them. But just an idea, and maybe that's a way we can get around things, and have everybody insured. And I'll leave it there. And I'll take my barbs and darts, and probably people throwing baseballs at my face right now. So I'm trying to
baseball season. We're in the middle of baseball season, so those bats are needed for baseball. I will. Well, let me respond to that. I'm not going to throw arrows at you, but I will argue that this council report argues against that. I mean, it basically says,
of course,
responsibility is the local, state level, tribal, what have you, and that that when it comes to paying down risks, that's their responsibility. That's being pushed to them. And the National Flood Insurance Program is the poster child for how they want to get out of that business. They want to transfer the National Flood Insurance Program to the private sector. Now, good luck with that, because it's not
going to take the risk.
Well, that's just it's not going to be solvent enough, because we know historically, looking at the National Flood Insurance Program, that 1% of the claims cost 30% of the value of what's paid out. And the reason for that is roughly 1% is 30%, because it's repeat claims, has been repeat claims. Now that is changing that ratio, because they're looking at how can we pay down that risk and move folks away from floodplains, as opposed to rebuilding in areas that are flood prone.
I'm going to interrupt you one more time. Sorry, I keep, because there's a thread I want to pull on this, and I know
Sure.
I'm going to put you back on track with it. Because when we take a look at insurances, right? The insurance companies for millennia have put this really cool caveat into it, and it says acts of God. It used to say acts of God. Now it probably says natural acts or something, but like acts of God, right? So in other words, your house, you have homeowners insurance, and a tornado whacks you. The insurance company says, we're not paying for that. That's an act of God. Unless you have tornado insurance, but I don't even know if it exists or not.
Oh, it has to be specific. It is incident specific usually. So yeah.
So they have an out. Oh, don't get me started on this. This is a whole other. I'll start ranting here in a minute, but I don't have time for it. But anyway, because we're coming here close to the end, there has to be a better way. And my way, the one I just proposed, is not thought out. Obviously, I'm not an insurance guy. Number one, number two, it's an idea that I'm just kind of thrown out there. But I mean, we have to do something, and that's the problem. That's the problem. Like I said, this report is interesting, that there are some areas where is the federal government an insurance company? No. Should they be in the insurance business? I don't know. But there has to be a way where we can protect people, because we're telling people to get insurance, and insurance companies go insolvent, and they still then push. Then the problem becomes a state problem again, and we, the people of California, or we, the people of Texas, or we, the people of Mississippi, or we, the people of Louisiana, you name it, in that state, cannot print money. We, the people of the United States, have the ability to have a bigger, be able to do things. And so there's a finite, my point about it is not saying that we should start printing money, because it's a whole other economic conversation. Modern monetary fund, sure, we could, theory, we can get into that. But the concept here is, states run out of money quickly. And some states have more than others, and some states have, are very poor, right? Your ability to have a life shouldn't depend on how much money your state brings in, and so I'm going to leave it at that. Otherwise, there's more soapbox to stand on. This conversation is going to have to go on longer. We're here
Yep.
at our end of our time,
Yep.
but I'll let you pull that string and finish off the conversation, and then we'll end this conversation for today.
Yeah, one thing I just want to touch upon just briefly in terms of insurance. Insurance is regulated at the state level. It's not necessarily regulated at the federal level, except when it has cross-border implications and that sort of thing. But it's always done at the state level. And hence, the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a unique aspect of what the federal government does to manage flood risk around the country, they still rely on private insurers to be a part of that and to insure those flood risks and things like that. So, but it's, it does rely on floodplain management and that sort of thing, et cetera. So I mean, just to change gears and to sort of summarize at least this report. And I think we do have to look at the overall messaging here. And that is, first of all, it's going to take time for any of this to happen. A good percentage of the recommendations here really fall into the need for legislation. So there's very few that are executive order related or would be.
I don't think any of them are they?
Well, no, there's a few here that could be. I mean, the recommendation for reducing administrative costs.
Oh, yeah.
The ability to transform FEMA, within certain boundaries, I think. But they didn't. I would say they didn't. It's not a matter of just killing the current, FEMA or administration of how it's doing. But I think what they're doing is reducing that reliability factor for what FEMA has done traditionally on both sides of the equation, on the mitigation and preparedness side and on the recovery side, that those expenses are being reduced. They're trying to be more efficient in pushing stuff out rather than it taking years to get out to folks when it comes to individual assistance and personal assistance, or personal public assistance is concerned. But again, it will take time to do. But we are dealing with the realities. The realities are that there are fewer FEMA employees that are there. A lot of them have left. A lot of them have been made redundant and asked to leave. So that's the reality that we're facing. And so I think that ultimately states, tribes, local governments, county governments, you have to step up more to the plate at this point and build those capacities at the local level. But that's always been true, right?
Yeah, it has. Well, we're not going to solve all the problems, and I'd like to hear everybody else. If you guys can go ahead and comment on what you feel, what's happening here, and it's good, bad, or indifferent, or and different opinions. So, look forward to hearing this. I know that we, as a profession, have a lot to work to do. I think everybody who has not read this report needs to open up and do some homework this week and read it, digest it, try to figure it out, and well, more to come on that. So, Andrew, my friend, it's always a pleasure to see you and hear from you. I have World Cup coming up here in 31 days is kickoff here in the LA Stadium, not SoFi. SoFi Stadium is no longer there. It's called the LA Stadium. So anyway, that's another story. All right, guys, I'll see you all later. As always, please stay safe and stay hydrated. When the sirens
scream out loud. We're the voice that breaks the cloud. Heads held high when things go wrong. We'll guide you through with strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound. Chaos reigns, but we're around.